Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are all well. The weeks just keep getting full of more and more stuff, and we've got lots to discuss today. First thing, Lloyd's unable to be with us tonight, but don't worry, we've got the rest of the gang are with us here. We've got up there in Clackmannan our favourite lawyer, our only lawyer actually. So Eva, how are you doing?
Very well, Roddy, thanks. And you?
Tickety-boo, just tickety-boo. And down there in the City of Discovery, we have Mr. Petrie. Alan, how are you?
Hi, Roddy, doing well. Sweltering like a pig, though, because the sun is shining and splitting the pavement here.
I know, that's the thing about Scotland, isn't it? Oh, we've got terrible summers after 2 days. Oh, it's too bloody hot. We're never happy. We're never happy. And I don't know where he is. He could be in Brussels. He could be somewhere in France. I really don't know. Where are we, Mr. Boswell?
Yeah, I'm in just Mons. It's down where Shape is. Yeah. Well, no, I'm back down, but I'm just about to head to France. So I'm helping some friends from Shape move to the south of France. So it's like a big van. I'm driving it, but everybody's running late. So I don't know.
We had this
I was going to do this for the road.
Yeah, we had this conversation last week, Phil. We are your only friends, mate. We are. There are no others. This is it. Your life is that bad. We're it. Nice to see you as always, my friend. You're welcome. No, not a lot. We've got to start, and as you probably heard over the weekend, folks, the news that Fergus Ewing has decided to stand in Inverness as an independent candidate. And we're delighted that Fergus, someone of his years standing and experience, we're delighted to hear it, Eva. And I'll come on later to the statement because the Liberate Scotland have decided, with Sovereignty and Liberate Scotland, to stand down their candidate in favour of Fergus.
Yeah, well, that's because Liberate Scotland and Sovereignty, as well as ISP and Eye for Eye, are determined to see independence. And if we see a candidate of Fergus Ewing's calibre, his pedigree, and particularly in this instance, his principles, then certainly we will stand aside when we believe that that's the right thing to do for our country. Because this is not about, as we said the other day, bums on seats. It's about maximising the vote for independence, and it's about maximising the number of seats that are held by true independentistas. And with a pedigree and a heritage and a history like Fergus Ewing, what else could independence supporters do but stand aside? And the proof of the pudding in relation to whether the SNP promotes country before party will be to see whether their candidate also stands aside and gives Fergus a clear run at what should be an open goal if we're all determined to see independence delivered at the soonest time possible, which is next year.
Yeah, indeed. Alan, you were part of the, a decision making with your colleagues or the colleagues in Sovereignty who had the ultimate and final decision, and they stood aside. But it's for the greater of the cause. It's the thing to do.
Yeah, I mean the whole movement will be saying finally an adult move in Scottish politics. Because now, I make no comment about this. Me and Fergus come from different ends of the political spectrum. But 2026 isn't about left politics, right politics, central politics. It's about independence. And nobody could ever challenge a Ewing's commitment to independence. So it was the right thing. And credit to where credit is due. Fergus has shown more spine in 1 year than the entire SNP front bench has in a decade. I mean, Liberate Scotland's decision not to stand against him, it's not just tactical, it's mature. It's showing leadership within this movement. It's taking party out of the equation and putting country firmly on the agenda. Just let's hope the rest of the Yes movement get behind this unity. There's too much people looking to get bums on seats, when what we should be looking for is votes for independence. Because I keep saying it every single week, we'll get votes for independence. The seats are a byproduct of that. But the votes we have to get over the 50%. That's the important thing. And by letting Fergus stand in a community that he loves and has represented for many, many years, family are well known in the area. It would be ludicrous for any true independence supporter to stand against him. So SNP, like what Eva said, stand aside. This is about independence, not your party.
Independence, nothing less, even nothing else. And here's the statement. I don't know if our folks out there can see it, but the important point I'd like to just read out here, Phil, is that Andrew MacDonald, who is the Sovereignty Liberate Scotland candidate who had been chosen to fight the constituency, as we say, for the greater good, stood aside. He decided that the best way to support the broader independence movement is to stand aside in this constituency in recognition of Mr. Ewing's long-standing commitment to his constituents and to Scotland. And while our candidate was fully prepared to contest the seat, we recognise the significance of Mr. Ewing's decision to stand as an independent and the strong local support he commands. This is not a retreat, but a strategic step forward for the cause of independence. And I think any independence supporting person should be applauding Sovereignty and Liberate Scotland, but especially Sovereignty and Andrew for stepping aside for the greater good, Phil. We do what it says in the tin.
Absolutely brilliant. It's phenomenal. Then I agree with what Eva and Alan have said. The Ewings and the independence, the word independence and the cause go hand in hand. Huge respect to Andrew MacDonald. He's already played a part in Scotland's freedom. We will meet again in politics, Andrew, for absolute certainty, because you are exactly the kind of people that we should be supporting and pushing forward. You're in it for the cause, not, as Alan said, for bums on seats or snouts and troughs. And the SNP won't stand aside because they are different, and different in a way that they do not support independence. All they want is to continue their snouts in the trough and work for the British and as devolutionists. And I first met Fergus in Glasgow on the lead up to the 2014 referendum. I started Yes Aberdeen and Yes Aberdeenshire. It was incredible. And Ewan McRae, was it? A young, lovely, brilliant guy. Came in and took over the Aberdeen job, which was great. And then obviously, finally, the SNP players started to get more and more involved. And we saw what we almost pulled it off. Well, I believe we did, but that's another story. But anyway, I went in to see him about how we engage with energy. And what you say is true, Alan. You know, this guy, we need the full church, the broad church of the politician and people's politics and the representatives in Scotland behind the independence cause. And Fergus understands business. I spoke to him about the energy industry, which he knows very well, knows a lot about. Obviously, he served as a minister. He is exactly why Scotland was doing well. He was close to Alex. He was trusted by the SNP when the SNP were looking at independence. No more. That's why he's no longer with them. And this is massive. I mean, for someone as huge, this is SNP royalty walking away from SNP. Yep. It's a huge message to independent supporters all around Scotland that when someone who is at the heart and soul of everything that made SNP what it is has now walked away and standing as an independent. Independence for independence. Let's do it.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. I mean, everyone knows Eva, my great hero and heroine, should I say, was Winnie. I've said it many times, not just tonight. And you all who know me know that Winnie was inspirational for me. But as Phil says, for someone of the Ewing clan to walk away, to be an independent, should be telling a lot of the SNP people, things are not going well.
If you put this in context, or the wider context, Fergus was first elected to the Scottish Parliament in 1999, when it first began, and he's been there ever since. But when he was elected in 1999, at the same time, So were his mum, Winnie, and his then wife, Margaret, who both of whom had obviously previously been MPs at Westminster, and Winnie had been a Euro MP, Madame Ecosse. In addition, obviously, Fergus's sister Annabel was elected to Holyrood in 2011, and she's been there ever since, and she's retiring next year. So this is a phenomenal event from the perspective of SNP royalty. But these people, the Ewings, weren't simply politicians, they were also all lawyers, successful in their own fields. And it's no coincidence that there are so many lawyers within the Scottish independence movement, because we believe in the rule of law and we believe in democracy. But where this takes us into a completely different realm is that Fergus's life has been about Scottish independence, it's been about the SNP, but he said very specifically today that he loves the people of his area, the people he represents, and he loves his country more than he loves his party. And that, for me, marks him apart as a man of great principle and exactly the kind of person that Scotland needs in spades in that Parliament to take Scotland towards our independence as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah, because on that, Alan, John Swinney, this week, beginning of the week, and it was released to the National with his big headline. It's within reach, Mr. Swinney said, and this was when he went to the UK. Now, the National changed the headline to Scotland 2050, but it was actually UK 2050 when he read out that big long list of things and how terrible it was and how independence were great. But at the end of it, Alan, there was no plan. There was no route. There was no way to get to independence. And that's the problem. The SNP don't have a plan.
Yeah, I mean, brilliant. Just 25 years to go. I could just see what all now in the care homes. Saltire on one hand and huddling on for grim death on that Zimmer frame on the other hand. Come on, ye independents. Well, I'm not prepared to wait that long, John. I mean, Swinney is like a sat-nav, which telling you you're at your final destination, you're stuck in a circle. Now, for you non-Dundonians, a circle is what you all wrongly call a roundabout. But, I mean, the SNP don't have a route. They don't have a plan. All they have is their wages coming in as MSPs. And they are so desperately trying to not lose them. Because let's face it, if they didn't have their staffers, where would they get the work done for their leaflets going out and their campaigning? It's all the staffers that are going out to these by-elections, which they're still losing.
Yeah.
It's time for them to start putting get their game on. Get back to what the SNP used to be, when the Ewings were heavily involved within the SNP. Start winning seats for independence, not for your own personal gain, because the people are not interested in filling your pockets. They had enough with that with Labour and the Tory party. They didn't expect Scotland's National Party to turn into the same thing. That's why more independent voters are staying at home rather than coming out and voting for the SNP. Now, we are giving them another opportunity in 2026 because we are putting our own necks on the block by standing in the constituencies and on the list. So every single Scot has the opportunity to vote for independence. If it's independence you want, then there's only one way to get it, and that is to vote Liberate Scotland to liberate Scotland.
Yeah, here. But isn't it, after all this time, Phil, they've been in power since 2007, and there's no plan. Here we are in 2025, going into 2020. There's lots of other things we're going to talk about in tonight's or today's show that says we need to get out, we need to get moving. And they don't have a plan. It's absolutely criminal.
It is. And Swinney, Robertson, Sturgeon, Yusuf, and a host of others, we have a list, need removed from the SNP leadership, as the SNP ship cannot be forced to turn away from the current Vichy government course and to switch it towards an independence course. With these compromised individuals in charge, that is not going to happen. So I agree with Alan, we have to get the SNP to change direction, but they will not turn the tiller. They will not guide us towards independence because they're not vested in it. Their interest is not vested in independence. It's keeping their snouts in the trough and doing what their handlers tell them, because they don't work for you. If you're in Scotland and you want independence, they work for the Union. If they're not being blackmailed or bribed by the British state, then they're simply devolutionists and downright lying about independence. Oh, is Nicola, John, Humza or Angus Robertson, etc. talking about independence? Well, it must be election time, because it's the only time they mention this word. But as I keep saying, watch their actions, not their words. We all say that now, and it's right. And they have not taken one step towards independence since Nicola took control of the SNP 10 years and 7 months ago. 10 years and 7 months ago, the Scottish people continue to suffer, and now John Swinney and the rest of these shysters talk up independence and do not have a viable plan. Asking the British government, as Angus Robertson announced, for a Section 30 order is not a viable plan, especially when they've told us they'll deny it, and not in my lifetime. It's not going to happen, according to these leaders, these different leaders, and that's across the board. That's the Tories, that's Labour, that's everybody who's got any chance of being in power. And if you think Reform are going to change anything, they'll go even more hardline. So this is deflection and misrepresentation. If you are a devolutionist, then get out of the SNP. But these people won't. All of those with a snout in the trough will persuade themselves that they're serving Scotland. They are not, because the SNP is not serving Scotland. That's why politically they have to be crushed. That's the reality. Only a disastrous election campaign result for the SNP will waken up the Scottish people in enough numbers to see that forcing our political parties to do our will is the only way forward. And the answer, friends, we all know, it's unification, a new yes movement under the single objective of independence and nothing less.
Hear, hear. Absolutely agree. John stood up in Parliament in Holyrood this week, Eva, and he was talking about people in Scotland, the pensioners, because the way we're doing the winter fuel payment, we're going to mitigate it and they'll get a wee bit more than they will in England. And he was all chuffed and they were all roaring and thumping their desks, thinking it was great. And they also announced, which is great. And I mean, that's a great thing. And also this, the Scottish government's going to end the 2-child cap in Scotland in April of next year. Fine, they're going to mitigate again. But here's the best way to mitigate everything, Eva. I've got a cunning plan. It's called independence, and we'll mitigate the bloody lot.
I'll believe anything that Shirley Ann Somerville says when I see it actually happen. Beyond that, I have to simply agree with you and say that the best mitigation is the only solution for Scotland, and that is independence. But the SNP know perfectly well that they cannot deliver independence by themselves. They know they can only do it with a campaign of unity. And I'm just reminded that obviously tomorrow, Saturday, is Barnett Burn Day. We'll be there, we're all under one banner, and by the time that this show goes out, we'll know how successful or otherwise the day may have been. But 2 or 3 years ago, Alan Smith, who was at that time the SNP MP for Stirling, spoke at Bannockburn, and he spoke very highly on stage about unity and the need for a unified campaign. I had the honour of speaking immediately after him, and I shook his hand as he came down off the stage, and I congratulated him and said, yes, that's right, let's have a unified campaign amongst all independent supporters. At that time, I think I was a member of the Alba Party. Between then and now, you tell me, Roddy, what the SNP have done to achieve the unity that is a necessary prerequisite of a successful independence strategy and the regaining of independence for our country. The fact is they have done nothing to unify the movement. In fact, they have almost completely destroyed the movement with their stupid policies that we spoke about ad infinitum in the past that folk don't want to listen to anymore because they're so scunnered. Shirley Ann Somerville's pronouncements about attacking poverty are empty promises because they are limiting and limited as the result of not having full economic powers. And what that means is we live on a budget which is limited by Westminster. It doesn't matter how much money Scotland makes. There is so much of our revenue that goes to Westminster, we cannot survive on what comes back. And when I say survive, I say that advisedly, because we know that in Scotland, it is the fact that poverty is a killer. Poverty reduces life expectancy. There is what we know has been often referred to as the Glasgow effect, and shortening of life expectancy in Glasgow and in other areas which are called euphemistically areas of multiple deprivation. For as long as politicians bow down to Westminster and are happy to be restricted to mitigating Westminster policies and to spending a limited Scottish budget mitigating where they think they can, then those politicians sitting in Holyrood prolonging that agony are directly responsible for the ills that Scotland suffers. And that is the impact of poverty, because you cannot address poverty with only a piecemeal stick and plaster along the lines proposed. You need dramatic, radical, targeted action, which is generational in its impact. And it starts with innovation like a national housing company, a national energy company, free school meals for all. Universal measures that have an impact have been shown worldwide in numerous different pieces of research to be exactly the transformational type of policies that Scotland in its current state would benefit from overnight. And the impact would be long lasting and permanent. Mitigate that, reduce this, reduce that. All that the SNP are doing is creating a rod for their own back. But you cannot mitigate everything. You cannot mitigate forever. One day you hit the brick wall and you run out of the money that you've been using to mitigate, simply because you're governed by Westminster. They hold the purse strings. And we will, as long as we're thrilled to Westminster, spend a disproportionate amount of our money on the infrastructure of England and on the foreign policy of Westminster and on weapons of mass destruction in the Clyde, none of which are welcome to the majority of the people of Scotland. So what the SNP needs to do is what it was invented to do, which is create a campaign of unity towards regaining our independence forthwith.
Absolutely. One of the things, ladies and gentlemen, is we in this show, as you know, for years, going back to 2020 when Nicola Sturgeon announced there'd be a constitutional convention, we kept saying, let's get this constitutional convention, let's have unity. We've been saying this for years. And when it didn't happen, that's why Liberate Scotland happened. And what you're seeing over this weekend and this week is that, as I said, what we say in the tin is what happens. And you're seeing with SNP, what they've got in their tin is a tin of carrots, nothing else. But here's the thing, Alan, we know that there's a lot of dissension within the SNP at the moment. And we spoke last week about Kelly Givens. Now, when Kelly Givens is sort of talking against the leader, you've got to say things are bad, but here's the big one. The wee ginger Doug is even telling John Swinney he needs to rethink his strategy. I'd love to know what his strategy is over Scottish independence. But even the wee ginger Doug's turning on them. That's got to tell you that, again, all is not well. They need to start listening, thinking and planning.
Yeah, but I mean, these people, yet again, like to sit on the sidelines and snipe, but they do nothing about it. I mean, we all know John hasn't got a strategy for independence because he's not interested in it now. I mean, even these mitigations that are coming in, they're not mitigations, they're manipulations, because these policies had been put in place by Westminster a long time ago. Why is he only bringing them up now to mitigate them? Oh, look, there's an election around the corner. That's all he's interested about, is using it. He spent all that time having people struggling to put food on the table for their bairns, just so as he could come up at an election time and say, I'm going to give you some extra money. I'm going to mitigate this now. Well, they've suffered for that long, John. You're a butty too late. And I'm getting sick and tired of bairns being used as political pawns for politicians to gain votes. It has to stop now. There's some things above politics. And the fight against poverty, the fight against drugs are all above politics. So let's get your finger out and get these things fixed instead of playing political ball games with them. But, I mean, the independence has been used as a slogan for so long, and people are getting fed up with that because we're wanting action done on this. And the only way to do that is to start putting MSPs in place that not just believe in independence, but have the backbone to push it through and to take independence back. Because at this present time, we've got people with jelly backbones in that parliament that are too scared to take on Westminster. Well, I'll tell you, there's not one person standing for Liberate Scotland who is scared of the Westminster establishment. Now, we know that it's more likely that they will send in the police when we go in there to retake our parliament, because we're not playing by their games. We are playing by Scotland's rules. And Scotland's rules are we take back our country at all costs. And that is what our MSPs are going to be doing. So they could stick their standing orders where the sun don't shine, because we are going in there and we are putting our standing orders in place, and we will be moving motions and we will be regaining our independence. Nothing else matters, because there's nothing you can do without being an independent nation and having the tools to do it.
Absolutely, that is the case. Now, even there was a come out today, some say this week, Phil, was that even with devolution at the moment, they're saying that Scotland, it came from the National, Scotland is going to be economies outstripping the rest of the UK, even under the constrictions of devolution. Just think, how much more could we do if we had the full control and levers of our economy, Phil?
Yeah, and everything we could make Scotland one of the wealthiest countries in the world, because that's what it is. The resources alone. We've talked often about it. There's about 35 fiscal and monetary levers that you need to run an economy. The Scottish Government and then the devolved governments have a fraction of those, primarily on tax raising. You've got no chance. You've got no chance to. It's a sticky plaster, as Eva said, in a gaping wound. I mean, they're welcome. You've got to say, and I agree with everyone everybody's said. The Scottish Government has announced when the two-child cap will effectively be reduced, coincidentally just before the Holyrood election. Yeah, right, that's right. That's a coincidence. I don't think so. But the Scottish people want independence. And while the SNP continue to lie to us and continue to work for the Brits, the Scots continue to suffer. That's the big thing. That's the message here. These mitigations are, of course, welcome if they come to fruition. Because I agree again, Shirley Ann Somerville cannot be trusted. In my opinion, she's a waste of space. But with independence, we keep our own money, manage it and drive our own affairs and reap the rewards. Only with independence will we be able to reverse these cuts in real terms, year after year. Even if Scotland gets a little more pocket money than we did last year, through the Barnett formula, if it's less than inflation and the rising cost of living, it's a reduction every single year, and you can do less with it, because if it doesn't fill if £100 doesn't fill the shopping trolley these days, then what's the point of getting £2 more when it's 105 to fill your shopping trolley? We know how it works, and it's been happening year after year. And Eva and Alan are right. We can only cover up these gaping holes temporarily and bit by bit, but you very quickly, and right now we're running out of money and paying for infrastructure. Do people know? I do a lot of work with the Institutes of Civil Engineering, etc. And ICE, we're talking up a 725 billion strategy for UK's infrastructure. Oh, wait a minute, just call it England's infrastructure, because that's what it is. We're paying for all these Crossrail. We're paying for all of these big infrastructure programs. And this is a 10-year, 725 billion pound strategy, but it's all in England. And we're paying the bill. Not acceptable. Independence, nothing less. Nothing else will work for us.
No, but there's two things on the coming out. This week I read, I was reading, Eva, the famous HS2. They're always going about, the ferries. That's the one that gets the old unionist excited, the ferries. Well, HS2 is now still not been a mile of track laid. It's now up to 80 billion, and another 5 years late. and we're going to be paying 10 billion of that, and it's only going to Birmingham to get people to Birmingham half an hour earlier, and it's costing 80 billion, and it's now another 5 years late. But ferries, Eva, ferries.
But there's a good argument about ferries, Roddy. Why does Scotland not have a direct ferry route to Europe? We could all invade Phil every week if we felt like it. But we don't have a direct ferry route to Europe because Westminster doesn't want us to have one. Because then the Scots would be speaking directly to the Europeans would be travelling directly to Scotland, and they would be able to bypass England. And they'd be spending more money in Scotland because that would be their first port of call. And that is just an extension of your analogy in relation to HS2. Westminster is, in essence, an English Parliament. England doesn't have devolution because it doesn't need it, because England gets everything it wants from Westminster. Mm-hmm. That's why we know absolutely beyond any shadow of a doubt that whatever decisions Westminster takes are always taken with England's best interests at heart. They happen to make these decisions off the back of what they've leached from the Scots, but that's slightly academic. I just find it appalling that the priorities of the Westminster government these days are so skewed, because their priorities are, for example, defence spending, or as we refer to it here, offence spending. Mm-hmm. Infrastructure that will benefit a very small number of people eventually, one day, a long time in the future. And the money that's spent on, for example, HS2 is astronomical. The return is minuscule. And all of that arises because of vested interests, corporate interests, military interests. It doesn't come as the result of what a government that is responsible thinks is best for the people of the country. It's not about that. It's rarely ever been about that. I mean, when was the last time that there was a Westminster government that you could actually say, hand on heart, looked after the people? That's not happened since probably very shortly after the war, in the context of NHS creation in England, Scotland already having its NHS, or massive programmes in respect of inoculation, vaccinations, house building, that sort of stuff. Nowadays, every single government at Westminster is there to prolong its own existence. That's why you have party politics and the structure that you have, and you scratch my back and a wee black book and all this sort of thing. It's not about benefits for the population at large. People know that. That's why they're scunnered with party politics. It's why the turnout is so low and voter apathy is so high. But Scotland can reset that. And Fergus Ewing has again shown the way, because the reset is to elect people who know their own backyard, who want to stand up for their own people, and who understand that Scotland as a country, as a nation, would be a far better place were we governing ourselves without one hand tied behind our back, which is where we will always be if we remain shackled to Westminster.
Absolutely. Here's the thing, we're every week, Alan, we're talking about, it seems, about something, another disaster. We're telling people on this podcast, here's what's going wrong, we have to get out, and here's how we can get out, and here's how we're going to get out. We had Grangemouth, which has been an absolute disgrace, that will be the only oil-producing nation in the world without a refinery, while England, with no oil, has got 5. Work it out, folks. Join the dots, as they say. And here's another one this week, but is going to affect Scotland. And that is the breaking news that 300 jobs now at Scottish Power are at risk from the London-based firm unveiled plans to transfer operations to South Africa because it's cheaper. They can make more profit. It's all about profit, not the people. They'll be making it from Scottish electricity, from our energy, but they're going to take the profits and the jobs are going to South Africa so the people in London can get bigger dividends.
Remember back in 2014, we were told, vote no, save the jobs, save the industry. How's your no going now? Still feel better together? We are being screwed right, left and centre. They are sucking Scotland dry, waking up, because very soon it'll be your job next. You'll be the one on the poverty line. And remember, we are now living in Starmer's Britain, where even the sheer pretense that you care about some vulnerable person will lose you your job. The Labour Party used to be the party of the worker, but now that doesn't count if you are sick, disabled, or poor, because you're a fiscal risk. That's all Labour are interested in, the fiscal risk of these people in poverty. Used to be the case where they would help. They would at least have a safety net. Wasn't a great safety net, but was you fell this far and no further. Well, they've just took the scissors to that and snipped it. They're not interested in Scottish employment or Scottish industry because they want to make Scotland the desert so we cannot be independent. That's how important the 2026 election is. This may be our last chance before we do become a desert, because Labour are trying their best. I mean, we all thought the Tories were bad. Labour just went, had my champagne. I'll show you how it's done. And that is the biggest problem we have got. People are not waking up. They still believe, or some people still believe, Labour are a socialist party. Well, I've got news for you. Labour are as much socialist party as the SNP are an independence party. And Scotland has to waken up to that. We have to put our priorities in place and start voting for those who are genuine. Now, I've heard a lot of people saying, you'll never get elected. You're new. You're wee. I remember those arguments for Labour against the SNP.
Yeah.
The SNP are now the government of Scotland. It took us a long time. But remember, at that time, independence wasn't popular. We were going on doors and getting abuse. We were getting swore at. We were getting threatened. We were getting bricks thrown at us. That doesn't happen now. You're welcomed. We just have to get the people saying, if you vote for us, we will win. That's how elections work. You vote for us, you put your trust in us, and we will deliver the goods for you. So in 2026, please, for God's sake, vote for your country. Vote Liberate Scotland.
Yeah. The other thing we didn't have in those days was any kind of media like this. We had no control over the media, and so we were out there blind. But folks, we spoke to you in the midweek show, and we'll speak again, and Techie's going to put up the email addresses. We need you to get involved. You have to help. We can't do it on our own. We need people to come and knock the doors, deliver the leaflets, stand in the street stalls, fundraise, do whatever you can. We need help. Get in touch and let's see what we can do. On what Eva was saying about, they're always looking after England and screwing over the Celtic nations, Scotland included. But here, they did it again this week. Rachel from Accounts, she, with the NIC rise, she's mitigated it in England. But in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, it's not been mitigated because they fiddled about with Barnett to make sure that we wouldn't get the consequentials. It's just typical of what they do, Phil. And sometimes they mute your microphone even.
Yeah, pound more in from me.
Yeah, cause.
Well, every dollar counts, as they say. Yeah, it's more of the same, and we know it. So they'll announce the big, you're getting 52 billion, more than you've ever had. Then you read the details, you realise it's less in real terms than we're getting less in real terms because it doesn't go as far. And then they pull stunts like this. So what she's done, she's come under mountain pressure, right? This is from all the devolved governments are critical here after being accused of underfunding the devolved governments, all of them. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And this is down to the increase in employer national insurance contributions, or NIC. And it's a 1.2% rise in NICs for employers on a salary above 5,000. So the employers pay a 1.2% rise on any salary above 5,000, and it's introduced on 6th of April. It's being covered by the Treasury in England through direct funding. But for the devolved administrations, Reeves has applied the Barnett formula. to calculate their allocations, right? What does that mean? And it gives you a wee clue. It's really boring, like most of this stuff. But although the formula adjusts funding based on population sizes, it does that. It doesn't account for the significantly larger public sectors operated by Cardiff, Edinburgh, and Belfast. Why? Because we've got much bigger areas. The people are more spread out. You've got more costs. It is simply more expensive to service people their needs from a local government perspective when they're spread out. Easy in a big city, easy when it's crammed. So it's much cheaper for England. So what does it mean for us? Well, it says that there's going to be all the finance ministers have said we're going to be left with much less, with substantial shortfalls and much less than we thought. What little we get has to go further. In Wales, the funding gap's about 72 million. Right, annually, and the Finance Secretary Mark Drakeford, who's really switched on, by the way, it's a guy you should listen to when he speaks. He says he'll take 36 million from reserves to cover half of it, but the rest is going to be borne by local authorities and public bodies, which means cuts to other services. That's what they're doing, and it's about 14% cuts you're looking at here. Yep. On top of all the cuts that we already have, Scotland. Estimated at 700 million. That's our bill for this. 700 million. With the Treasury offering 339 in additional funding. In Northern Ireland, where it's around 200 million, it's 146 allocated. So Scotland is by far and away the most affected by this, and we're getting hammered by it. And in fairness to Shona Robertson, she's called for the tax rise to be reversed or fully funded. She says, failing that, I'm quoting her here, we have asked that they fully fund this tax increase to ensure Scotland's NHS, councils and other public services don't lose out on vital revenue. But this is what's happening. We are absolutely getting screwed down to the ground again. They're going to undercut the National Health Service. They're going to cut teaching. They're going to cut education. They're going to cut all these emergency services we're getting. It's absolutely appalling. And
can I try to interrupt you, Phil? And the thing is, it's been done with the Labour government in London. And when these cuts come, because they'll be left with no chance, because as Eva said earlier, you can't mitigate everything. And so when these huge cuts come, Sarwar will stand up and say how terrible it is that the SNP are cutting these services and paying people off. Well, it's his government that's causing the problem. And our corrupt media, to the core, will back it up.
And SNP continue to play their game. That's the biggest crime the SNP are committing. They're working as an arm of the British government because that's what they are. Because as this cost of living crisis continues and public services come under further and further pressure, the funding disputes over national insurance could become a flashpoint in both the government relations and in Labour as well. It's going to affect Labour, but for us, we should be using this. We should be working so hard for independence and unifying behind the cause, because otherwise we will continue to face this crap every single year.
Exactly. Shona Robertson, you don't need to ask Westminster. Ask John to make a few phone calls and let's get a united front and let's get independent by May 26. We can do it. It can be done. The opinion polls tell us there's a support out there, but we need the unity to get together and we can do it. Eva, on this, because I just want to show you a couple of slides here that do it. Now, remember when they cut the winter fuel? Rachel from Accounts said, well, the country can't afford it and, we could go bankrupt. And in the same week, they gave $3 billion to Ukraine. But this week again, this obnoxious woman, I've got to say, has turned around and said that the UK benefits system could collapse if they don't cut disability benefits, for God's sake. If they don't cut the pittance they give to the disabled in the UK, it could crash the UK benefit system. Oh, really? And they then turned around. Here's the real nastiness of the Labour Party. They've told their MPs, any MP who votes against the cuts or doesn't support the cuts will be blacklisted from any jobs and treated like a leper down in. And that's the problem, ladies and gentlemen, with the party whip. When they stand up before the election and say, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll save Grangemouth, We'll pay the WASPy women. We'll give you the winter fuel. We'll protect that. We'll get rid of the 2-child cap. And as soon as they get down to London or they get into Holyrood with their British parties, the whip comes in and says, no, no, no.
It's quite disgusting that what Labour are doing is simply targeting the weakest and the most vulnerable. And the reason why they're doing this is because these are the folk that generally don't have the wherewithal to fight back, because they don't have personal resources, whether it's financial or in terms of strength, to be able to fight back. And, you know, the UK has a deficit in part because of Brexit, in part because of very poor decision making by our politicians over a long period of time, but primarily and very simplistically because we import more than we export. But that position wouldn't apply to an independent Scotland, because an independent Scotland would be the other way about. We would be exporting more than we import, and we would be, as I said earlier, attracting tourists and probably more students and workers to an independent Scotland than we are as a constituent part of the United Kingdom. But there is something very dark and deep and sinister about a politician who lives in a house worth £4 million where we pay our electricity bills, and she's looking to reduce benefits paid to people who've got disabilities. Now, I know with one leg how hard it was to get disability money. It is not an easy task. But if you are disabled, the reason why you're applying to the government for assistance is often to enable you to get to work. I work full-time and more, as do very many disabled people that I know, including disabled MPs and MSPs. But if your easy target to make cuts are people who are disabled and dependent on state support, might I suggest that the Labour Party of old was not ever your natural political home. Because if Keir Hardie had been buried in a grave, you'd hear them burling now. It was Chris McElhenney that corrected me a while ago when they said that and pointed out that actually had been cremated, but that's another story. It's anathema to consider that the party who spoke about looking after your citizens from the cradle to the grave, who spoke about the NHS being free to all at the point of need, who did what they did in the context of council houses and all the other great things, trade union movements, and an element of egalitarianism and equality and a very socially just outlook. They've lost all of that. And instead, they're saying to folk like my own MP, Brian Leishman, who's not a bad guy, we disagree on the Constitution, but we probably agree on practically everything else. But folk like him are the people that are not going to be promoted within the Westminster government if they continue to speak out for the folk that they thought they were elected to represent. And the only way Scotland gets out of this, the only way, is independence. And the only way we're getting independence anytime soon is by recognising that we have to talk to each other, to mobilise and turn into votes on the day that 50-odd% of people that want to be independent. The support for the SNP is 30-odd%. Support for independence is at least 50% without a date and without a campaign. With a date, with a campaign, with unity and with common purpose, that vote will soar. But it requires John Swinney to stick away, put away the propaganda and the nonsense and the fancy sound bites and just say to himself, what is it that I want folk to remember me for? What do I want to go down in history as being responsible for? Do I want to be Honest John that took my people towards independence? Or do I want to be the halfwit that surrendered and gave in to unionist forces, put party before country and let my fellow citizens down? There's a stark choice. And for Fergus Ewing, he might have struggled with it for a wee while, but he's made the right decision. It is high time that those remaining in the SNP did likewise and led our country to where we should be.
Yeah. And not an SP, any of the parties. You know who I'm talking about. Pick up the phone, get in touch. We need unity, and we will come to accommodations, because Scotland is more important than parties or anything else. And 40% of our people are living in poverty. They ain't going to get out of it while we stay in a devolved bloody Scotland, that's for sure. But here's the thing, Alan, I mentioned earlier, we can spend 80 billion on a train line, a toy train line running for a few miles between London and Birmingham. We can spend 250, 300 million, or billion rather, on weapons of mass destruction that we can't use without America's permission. We're going to increase defence spending so we can go and kill people in foreign lands on behalf of America or the Israel. We're talking about, we're sending money to Ukraine. We've got lots of money for them to go and kill Russians and do whatever and steal and whatever the hell else they do in Ukraine. We're spending fortunes helping Israel to commit a genocide. We've got lots of money for that. But when it comes to people on disability in the United Kingdom, we might crash the benefit system if we give people a living wage. It's appalling, it's disgusting, and it's absolutely immoral.
Yeah, I mean, remember in the 1950s in Hollywood, they had a campaign, the John Waynes and all the rest of them, to catch the Reds under the beds, to get them out of the business, make sure they didn't cause any trouble, make sure their life was running as smoothly as possible without these people interfering and making things better for the lower classes. Who would have thought in 2025 we would have a Labour Party doing exactly the same thing? They are trying to remove those who have the beliefs, the funding beliefs of what the Labour Party used to be. Now, that you mentioned the high-speed rail. There's a lot of people don't believe that Scotland is paying for that. Because, now get this one, because they've taken out loans to pay for it. Who do you think pays back the loans? It's Scotland. 8, 9, 10% of all the loans taken out by Westminster is paid by Scotland, regardless if Scotland benefits from what that has been spent on. That's the facts of the Westminster system. They take out the loans, they benefit, we pick up the bill. That's why we're here. Do you really think they like us? No, they like our cash. That's what they're after. But if you want to go after benefit scroungers, I know one. And I'll name them. I mean, they are really, really nasty and get millions of pounds on benefits. They are slum landlords. Their name's Windsor, the King of England. Start cutting his funding because he's the biggest benefit scrounger in this country. His house has hundreds of bedrooms. Open up. There's lots of homeless people in England. Open up. Let people get in there off the streets. Because one man doesn't need that. It's just pure greed. People do not. I mean, we're told that people come into this country to get benefit, to see the king, and we'll get tourist industry, get lots and lots of money in. How many tourists come to this country and actually see any of the royal family? Get a grip. They come here to see the castles, the museums, and everything else. Very few people actually meet any of the royal family. So they are not contributing to this at all. We are, as taxpayers, we are funding them. And if we can't afford benefits, then we certainly cannot afford him. We must start from the top and cut down from the top, because cutting from the bottom is going to kill people. Poverty is a killer. It's probably the number one killer in this country. And to me, it is murder by the state, because the state can change it. Because poverty is not natural. It's politically made.
And I would just say the real name's actually Saxa Gotha Coburg. Yeah. That's but that's it, as I was saying, Phil. We can always find money for wars, for killing. And they said this week, no money for disabled, but Reeves has said, and so has Stammer, they may support Israel in this against Iran. Now, without getting into too much, but the fact of the matter is, it's an unprovoked attack on a sovereign nation. The same thing they're telling us that happened in Ukraine with the, we shouldn't like Russia and with the sanction them and do everything, but we're going to go and help Israel, who's done the exact same in the Middle East. We've got money for that, but not for the disabled. It's kind of screwed up in my eyes.
It's terrifying, absolutely terrifying, and it could take us to nuclear war. And the ridiculous thing, a country the size of Iran, when you can't even beat the Houthis in Yemen, what chance have you got against Iran? There was a wargaming. There's a general. Go to the social media in the States, and the Americans are telling their own people, and educated, informed Americans are telling their own people, don't do this. Because if you take on Iran, there was a wargaming exercise, and it's the Marine Corps training college, and they did an exercise to see, this is about 15, 20 years ago, how America would fare if it took on Iran in a war. And it came out they would lose badly. And the powers that be says, that can't be right. Run it again. They ran it again. They came out badly. They lost again in the war game. And the general that did that, the lieutenant general at the time that did that, forget his name, was again spoken to recently by some of these commentators, and go on to there's various sites, we keep mentioning them. Danny Haifong's a really good one just now. He's got a lot of good stuff on this, and they were talking about if it happened now, well, the Iranians are now way ahead. They're being underestimated, and we're doing this at the behest of Israel. It's Israeli shills that are causing this war. The lobbyists and all these people are in the pocket of Israel. They're dictating our foreign policy. They're dictating America's foreign policy. And we're on the edge of a nuclear war, and more and more people are starting to wake up. First, to the atrocities of Israel. The atrocities that they're carrying out is evil personified. And it's an appalling. We've talked about it a few times. Please read into this. Do not support any government or any party that wants war in your name, because not in my name, not in the Scots. The people of Europe don't want war. The people of Scotland don't want it. No. And we're going to go to war here, and it's lies. We're being lied to. There's no weapons of mass destruction. All the nuclear sites were fully monitored and fully checked, and we're not breaking the law. And we're not making weapons-grade uranium. It's a lie, and we're going to murder people for this. It's a disgrace.
Yep. Well, fortunately, the French are they know more about Iran, I think, than America or the UK. They will not support the war, they said. But of course, the Tories. So we've got no choice if you're in the UK, folks, because the Tories are up for it. They're up for it. They'll be in it. Labour's up for it. You can bet your bottom dollar Farage and his mob will be up for it. The Liberals will be up for it. So you don't have a choice if you're in the United Kingdom. But that's the problem, Eva. They've always got money, but and maybe coincidence, I'm such a cynic. Another thing that came out this week, now I'm sure it's just coincidental. The biggest deposit, the second largest deposit of lithium, which is needed, ladies and gentlemen, for electric cars, among other things, has been found in Iran. Suddenly the Americans want a regime change. Is it just coincidence?
Can't understand this, because it cannot possibly be related to the plunder of previous decades and centuries of, for example, diamond mines in South Africa, or any of the riches that there were in India, or all the parts of the world that the British and the French and the Belgians invaded and took over and, I suppose, emptied of resources as far as they possibly could. There's always an explanation like that, isn't there? It's just follow the money. It's just more of the same. I don't know what it is. Is it geopolitics? Is it bigger than that? It's just sad. And it's dishonest to pretend otherwise. I think what I don't like most of all out of it, though, is when you see John Swinney making huge speeches about Scotland's influence on the world stage, when in fact Scotland has no influence at the moment on the world stage. We're not going to have any influence unless and until we're independent. And I'd have far more respect for him in any protestations he may have regarding any wars or any plunder anywhere in the world, if he were to agree that Scotland has been plundered by the United Kingdom and that the way to fix this was to have a united campaign for independence, and then we can speak out as an independent country at the UN and in other international forums about the unjust events that arise elsewhere within our world.
Scotland doesn't even have an influence in the UK. In fact, the way John Swinney's going, he's going to have very little influence in Scotland if he doesn't get his finger out. But that's the problem. I'll be going about all the things, benefits, people in poverty, kids going to school, hungry and everything. But there's always money to go to foreign wars. It is an English thing. It really is.
It's an investment. I mean, in 2014, we had Project Fear. 2025, we've got Project Fear on steroids. They're trying to tell us how unsafe the world is and how we need to stick together. Well, the reason we are in a predicament where we are a target is simply because we are part of this United Kingdom. It is Westminster putting the target on our back. Scotland is a peaceful nation, just like many other small nations. Now, what has Iran ever done to us? Nothing. What is all the other countries that the Great Britain is bombing or paying for bombs done to us? Nothing. They may have went into Israel, but why? Because Israel attacked them. That's what people are forgetting. I mean, even going back to the 7th of October, September, when Palestine were supposed to have attacked Israel. People seem to think that's when the problem started. The problem started in the 50s, when people of Gaza were being murdered, raped, kidnapped. This is not something new. This has been happening to them for years. So why is that forgotten about? And all you're interested in is what's happening now. And using that as an excuse for the murder, rape, and kidnap of children and women. Simply because their skin colour is something not the same as yours, and they are what you would class as foreigners. Now, I said this a couple of weeks ago. There is only one race in this world, and that's a human race. And until these fascists and racists start accepting that, we will always have this problem. So what you should be doing is calling them out, not supporting wars against our fellow brothers and sisters, mothers and daughters, who are only trying to make a living for themselves. And a lot of times in their countries, it's extremely difficult without wars. Never mind the way it's going just now. I mean, there is children there, as Eva said many times before, having limbs amputated without anaesthetic. Just imagine that on your own child. Would you be able to sit there and watch your own child go through that kind of pain? Because I know I would. And you wonder how these people are angry. We should all be angry. We should be demanding our money be spent to help people, not kill them.
You've maybe seen on social media, it's doing the rounds, Tony Benn's great speech before the Iraq war, where he talked about it, and he said, do you think an Iraqi mother loves her child any less than you love your child? Do you think when, they lose a husband or a father or a son, they feel less pain? It's just scandalous. Stop the killing and let's start building. But the clock's beating us, Phil. There's a couple of things I want to go through. I want to start. Keir Starmer, who is in Glasgow parlance, certainly in Barnett parlance, a bit of a fanny. And here he is.
Okay.
Yeah, they all look the same, don't they, Keir? He thought that was the Prime Minister, the President of Korea. It was the interpreter. That's the guy. And that's the guy who's going to take us to war. He doesn't even know they all look the same, Keir. Eh? Wee bit racist there, mate. I think a wee bit racist. But then, he just kept making it better and better, because I wouldn't say he's subservient to America and to Trump, but But Trump dropped his papers, and there's Keir Starmer stooping down. If ever you could get a metaphor for the relationship between the UK and America, there it is. Keir Starmer down there. I was tempted to say something, but I thought I can't. The watershed. While you're down there, Keir, Trump might have said to him, the man is a clown, an embarrassment.
He is an Israeli shill, if ever there was one, an ass kisser of Trump with his sycophantic grovelling in front of Trump. Remember what he's using the royals. Oh, the king is delighted to hear. We'll have a big celebration. We'll have a grand dinner. Oh, it was uber cringeworthy what he did last time, and that's more of the same. And then he's playing cards with 3 male model refugees from Ukraine, which apparently is what prime ministers do these days. But he might have been cheating since they are allegedly arrested for setting his shit on fire. But this latest embarrassment was hilarious, absolutely hilarious. This guy's a clown. This guy's doing exactly what he's told, and the thing is, he's controlled not by the people who voted for him. If you voted Labour, you wasted your time. If you vote for Tory, you've wasted your time. These people no longer represent us. That's the problem. The infiltration by the lobbyists and the control by the corporations now call the shots. People like BlackRock, the hedge funds, the big oil companies, the big pharma, the military-industrial complex. These are the people that call the shots these days. That's why we go to war, because it makes money. So what we need to do is make a smaller, nimbler, more able economy if we stand on our own 2 feet and look after our own affairs. Independence, nothing less, folks, and stop these embarrassing clowns representing us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting that way. I'm really fed up with Starmer and Co, because his priority is certainly not Scotland. Northern Ireland is not a priority. Wales is not a priority. Not even England's a priority. It seems his biggest priority, apart from himself, is Israel. He puts that above all the other things. We've got to get out of here, folks. We've got to go. And last thing before we go, 2 things. One last on Donald. Apparently he walked out because apparently he left the G7 early because he was pissed off with Macron and he had no instant meeting Zelensky. So he just went, I'm out of here. And they're all running after him. Can we join in your war? Can we please? It's embarrassing. And anyway, folks, the clock's beating us as always, and I hope you've enjoyed today's show. And can I just say, Wednesday, I've got a special treat for you. You all know, all you Scottish independence supporters, that Salvo Liberation dispatched our Craig Murray to New York to do some work over there and to see what he could do to push the cause. Now, there's all sorts of things getting said, and some people are thinking that there's Craig's come back with the independence in a briefcase. He hasn't. But I tell you what, you can find out what he has got, what happened, who he spoke to, and what's going on if you watch the midweek Prism, because he's going to be talking to us for Wednesday. So until then, you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.